Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families love God and use tech. With us today is Justin Pavey. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
The sultry tones of Justin have joined us again, and I'm excited for this conversation because if you're not familiar with this podcast or this particular episode, this goes back, Justin, all the way to year one. Like recording almost on a single mic kind of situation. So you get to sit further away from me now. You're welcome.
That is a big reason why I'm here.
The further away piece. So normally when we do these episodes, we talk about being nerd dads. That was last year and the previous years. That's been kind of a growing passion of mine, is how do we help people be passionate about what they're what they're passionate about, what God's given them passion for. Nerd meaning, the definition that I like to use is someone who's passionate about a niche, passionate enough to want other people to care about it. So for you listeners, you might love the game of golf or another sport like baseball. I feel like there's a niche, like passionate following. I know a few of those people. Or you might be passionate about old cars or cycling or whiskey or beards. But whatever your thing is, you don't have to necessarily show up early for the, Star Wars episode 10 release wearing full Ewok costume. But
you should.
You should. Is an adult in an Ewok costume just a Wookiee? Like, is that?
Yeah. Especially if you're naturally hairy.
Yeah, I would never qualify then. Rats, that is crushing to me.
Sorry.
No, it's good. Actually, as a side note, Northern California did a talk, went out like, let's check out the redwoods. Found out afterwards that I was where Endor was recorded, which blew my mind. And I was like, I didn't even know when I was there. I feel like I was cheated a little bit of my enjoyment of God's creation by also missing the fact that I was in Endor. It's all very weird scaling. Like it looks like normal trees until you look at stuff next to the trees and you're like, oh, those aren't, I see. Like that's a 300-foot tall tree that's 25 feet across.
Did you spot any detritus of pathetically crushed ATSTs? That's the real
always
question.
Yes. Yeah, of course. I camped in one.
Some log traps were still there for them to walk into.
Yes. Yeah, there's all the memorabilia left there.
Still bitter about the Battle of Endor years later.
Oh, because that's like a pet peeve of yours when the spear-wielding Luddites crush the, advanced technology of the Imperial.
Yeah. Especially when I read years later that the original vision was for it to be on Kashyyyk, or however you say it.
Is that the Wookiee?
The Wookiee homeworld.
Oh.
But for some reason, the budget was deemed out of control even for that, for Star Wars. So they were like, what if we just made everything smaller, including the little pathetic Ewoks?
Okay.
It's like, so whenever I see them, I'm picturing, a bunch of Chewbacca's walking around, and I'm feeling bitter.
Would have been way cooler.
Yes, and bowcasters.
Yeah, I was going to say a bunch of bowcasters out there would have been actually a fair fight.
They're like, well, we don't have artists who can draw the lasers, but we can throw spears. It's like,
we
why?
could drop these rocks on this claymation ATST. The speeder bike part was good. That's got some. You got some.
It was
computer.
good. The sound effects are with me and burned into my soul for all time.
Indelible, just phenomenal. Lots of the exact same scream from Stormtroopers. Yeah, so I'm sorry. For the listeners, this might be what this episode is like for you. Because as two people that appreciate Star Wars, but we don't have to, by the way. You can be a nerd about other stuff. My passion then is, how do we help fathers who are called by God to love and serve and lead our families? How do we do that well with these passions? Because my goal in doing this, and I think, Justin, we're on the same page here, of like, we have passions, and that's great. Like, we're both interested in very nerdy things that are typically nerdy, like Star Wars, but also have our own niche passions. And we don't want to have those apart from our kiddos. For an example, for me, like riding bikes. I don't want to do that apart from my kids. Like, I know enough people in the cycling community, they're just called bike widows. People who don't see their husbands in warm weather because their husbands are gone like 5 to 6 hours at a time on a regular basis. It's like golf, but we come home tired. Uh, so
Shots fired.
So, like it's a problem that we need to talk through. So I guess my first question would be for you is like twofold. What are you finding just like interest and excitement in? What are you just enthused about for your niche area? And then we can talk about how does that fold in with your family. But just for Justin, like what's a niche nerd interest of Justin's these days?
I mean, it's been for the last several years now. It's just getting unnecessarily intricate board games and learning them and then teaching them to my kids and then playing them with them. And they take months. We're exclusively into cooperative campaign games.
Okay. Cooperative meaning you can play together. Campaign game meaning...
It's like start to finish. There's usually some level of story. The missions are connected. That usually involves, your characters growing in power and
all right. So it's got like some
levels.
RPG element to it.
Yeah, typically. So, and
or like legacy games would count as
legacy games. Yep.
Okay.
We love a good legacy game. So
for listeners who don't know legacy games, like Risk has a legacy version. So instead of just playing Conquer the World, you play like little mini scenarios and then the game changes. Like the map will grow or you'll open new abilities or you'll like tear up cards that like no longer function in the game.
That's our favorite part is, you basically use the game. So by the time it's done, a lot of them, it's over. It can't be used again, but there's something appealing about that. The kids love if I hand them a card to tear. They're just like, it just feels so wrong.
Permanence
and
is so good.
This is amazing. I have to do
video
this.
games don't have that. You can just reset your video game. Like you can't reset the paper you just tore.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something very visceral about it.
That's the true no save scumming, as it's called in PC games, right? You can't reload the card, the last save where the card existed. It's gone.
It's gone, man. It's gone. So you've been enjoying board games. Now you have a process for this. Like, I don't know if listeners will understand that when you're like, I like board games, you don't just find a board game you like. How do you go about isolating the games you're going to purchase to play with your children over weeks?
Yeah, that's funny. It's a process that's developed, but I really enjoy like learning about board games that are out there. Usually there's some good like YouTube channels where people play cooperative games and just kind of introduce and review them. So which leads into lots of time on Kickstarter or its competitor GameFound, and I'm sure there's others. But basically these games are so niche that they're never going to be something you can find on Amazon, for example, or even necessarily sometimes eBay. It's like they'll make a very finite number of them via Kickstarter, and that's it. There will never be more. And it can be impressive when you're like, oh wow, this crowd funded $2 million, right?
Yeah.
But then you do the math, you're like, oh, that represents like 2,000 of these
because
out there.
They're so expensive.
And they're not making any more.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but that's the beauty of the whole Kickstarter platform with board games is they're not trying to make a mass-produced rule set or thing that's like, oh, we need to appeal to millions of people and either dumb it down or, maybe write into some of the normal things that would attract a large audience. It's like, no, we kind of have this goofy vision for 5,000 people playing this game.
And that, like Kickstarter makes that possible. Like, do you have one that sticks out to you of like, this was a game that wouldn't have made it in mass market? Like Hasbro never would have picked this up for a Target, aisle, but it's just a genius idea that smart people and like talented people put together.
I'd say the one we're doing right now, the kids really like. I mean, the kids have even said it's like their favorite ever, and I'm like,
what game is that?
Ever? It's actually a Christian dungeon crawler. If those could go together, I think so. It's called Deliverance, and
this is the Frank Peretti. Like way I call it Piercing the Darkness. That's why I said Frank Peretti. But like the 90s spiritual warfare.
Yeah, idea. Exactly. And so again, I just through this one YouTube channel, the guy was presenting this game and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I looked into it and kind of basically I like to learn the rules. I have so many downloaded rule sets on my computer, like PDFs. Do
you have like an iPad just dedicated to like, this is my rule iPad?
Well, the kids have broken all the iPads, so I used to. But so when I'm working out, basically, it's like, ooh, I'm going to read some rules here. And from that, usually can evaluate if I think it's something me and the kids would like. or you're like, oh, that's a weird design, or oh, that sounds amazing. You know, it actually makes me think of a conversation you and I had years ago about, hopefully you remember this idea of yours. And if not, I'll just say I came up with it. But that human creativity is one of the windows that you talked about into seeing God's character, right? Yeah. It's like, how can people endlessly come up with new art or new ideas, or, you know, and it's like a glimpse into being made in his image. And I often think of that conversation when looking at board games, because I'm like, you know, again, my favorite Gladiator quote, who knew men could build such things? I've probably said that in all 4 podcasts we've done.
I really hope that we can go back and find just make a supercut of
exactly
Justin over the years saying who knew men could build such things.
But just thinking, what a great idea. How would you have ever thought to make a game that does that? Or, you know, just taking simple things like dice and cards and just mixing it up. And you're like, whoa, that's cool. And then just the enjoyment I get of thinking, my kids are going to really think that's cool too.
Yeah.
Right. And in part just because they do, and in part because I'm their dad. And so things that are interesting to me, naturally interesting to them, which is one of the things you have to really guard your own heart for, right? And be on the lookout for, because it's like, you know, a good friend told us years ago when we first had kids, like, what's normal to you, you know, or whatever your environment is for your kids growing up, that's going to be their normal, right? And so there's kind of a responsibility there that the normal is consistent with biblical worldview, as opposed to all sorts of stuff that they're just take for granted. And it's like, oh, well, that's what we just did as kids. Like, that's not a good thing.
No, I love that. Like that, both of those. I love the idea when you talk about like your children experience what I would call awe, right? They experience wonder and amazement and enthusiasm and excitement and a willingness to take their attention and give it to something that's been curated by you, because it's designed and creative, and they know that they can trust you to make something or to find something awesome because you enjoy that. That's something God's gifted you for. And therefore, like, they give themselves more quickly to it. And then they are inspired by it because, yes, board games are an example of like storytelling and artwork and creative problem solving and like all the fun, like cooperative or competitive aspects of mind games, if you will, like necessarily not a lot of moving parts in these ones usually, but like, it is so cool to watch them as like, they'll take to different parts. I'm sure you've seen, like, I know with my boys versus Hadley, like they like different aspects.
Right.
Like one person loves cards that have lots of text. And one person just loves like a good story. And like, as long as the story is there, like that's fun. And one of them just wants things to have glitter. Like, it does not matter. The battle mechs are all painted purple on her team. Like,
I was sure you were going to say that was Henry, but
Henry doesn't mind purple. Henry likes a good story. And as long as there are an obscene number of rules on a ridiculous number of cards, like Owen is in a happy space. But giving them what you mentioned then, the second part. So yes, we want to feel awe and wonder, but there are things that I know they would love. But I'm like, I can't give this to you in good conscience. So one of the examples, and should I name names on negative examples?
It's your podcast, man. You get to decide.
I'm going to say it out loud. I think I've said it before, but like, my kids don't play Warhammer. Even though I know for a fact they would love Warhammer. And specifically Warhammer 40K. And for those who don't know, Warhammer is like a really cool idea. It's basically like Space Marines, right? That's cool. Dudes in armor, like stomping around planets, like being awesome. Except there's no good guys. There's like 16 different groups you can play of different like races of creatures. And none of them are good. Like, all of them are horrific. If any of them won, it would be terrible news. And the entire goal of the entire game is xenocide. It's not like, oh, we got to save our home planet. There are no home planets. Literally, the subtitle is, in the future, there's only war. Like, there's no point to the war. And so my kids walk into this board game shop, and they're very tasteful. It's like off in a curtained off area on the side, and my boys are drawn there like flies. And they were just, I lost them one time. I'm like, where did they go? We were like playing games. Sure enough, they're like standing, arms by their sides, mouths agape at like these massive machines and tanks and, you know, monsters and all this stuff. And they're like, Dad, why can't we play this game?
Yeah,
like, exactly. I get it. The wonder is there and the amazement. And it's very creative people making really neat stuff. Except the soul of that game is horrific. And also the people who run the game basically hate the people who play it. And every 18 months will change the rule set. So when you spent $400 to buy all those pieces, they now stink and you can't win anything. You have to buy another $400 worth of pieces, which in a video game is lame, but with a board game is just like vindictive and cruel. Like
think of all the time I spent painting
right,
miniatures.
We
and they're
assembled
worthless.
these things and like cut them out and glued them and sanded them and painted them, and then you told us they're no longer good. Like why? So all that to say, that's a game where I'm like, man, boys, like I would love for you to have this, but you've asked me for an egg, and I know for a fact that's a snake for you. Like it's not going to be fair. It's going to break your heart. It's going to introduce some ideas that are just frankly dark and sad.
Right.
And so like we're not going to play that, but we'll play these other things that are also fun. And that's where BattleTech comes in for us.
Yep.
But that was a long aside on, I love that idea of awe and wonder and like sharing with your kids what makes you excited, right? If rules make you excited, helping your kid, doesn't mean they'll love it, but they at least appreciate their dad and can appreciate he loves it.
Right.
And then being thoughtful. It was explained to me, Ann and I were going to a church with Dr. Steve Shell, and his example of like, for us, we know where the snakes are in some experiences. We're like, hey, you know what? Like I can watch this movie, but I know like this lie comes up in this movie, or I can read this book, but I know that like this scene, I'm going to skip this part. Right. So there's these, we sometimes eat around the poop and the brownies because we're like, well, it's not pure, but like I know how to make these choices. But he talks about like leaving the back door of the house open for the snakes. And he's like, you know where the snakes are and you know which ones are poisonous. So you know how to like get around them or throw them out when they arrive, but your kids don't. And there's this chance that you're letting the snakes in, and your kids might get bit by things you never intended because you just weren't deliberate enough in the loving content, the Philippians 4:18 of whatever you're ingesting. So that's amazing. Deliverance has been a game you've enjoyed. Then you do have a very like your research mind. I'll just say for listeners, Justin's brain doesn't work like most people's brains. He likes spreadsheets and Excel, cells, and making lots of reasonable decisions. So your research piece, what I love about it is you'll research games and then I'll just ask you for like your top 5 and I'll show them to my kids and they'll pick one. And then I'm like, great, I'm going to take like the cream of the cream that you've already scraped and just get one of those.
There you
and
go.
like, that'll be what we end up doing. So then with how does that work with your family? Because not everyone's going to be into games, but I feel like we can extrapolate to our own interests. How do you take weeks to play a game? Where does that work in your schedule? How do you guys make that happen without Nicole hating you and telling you ultimatums about your life choices?
Yeah, it is important to clarify that the more nerdy and intense the gaming rules involved, and maybe the more painting required, the less Nicole's probably interested in it, because she's just like, she actually wants to play. She doesn't want to have 5 other people telling her, oh, well, you flip this card and then you rotate that 90 degrees and then that's exhausted, so you have to roll the, it's like, how is this enjoyable to have to read the Encyclopedia Britannica before we even start, and then we have to use it as a reference guide the whole time. Yeah. And we're like, what's the big deal? That's amazing.
Like, that's exactly what we love. Put on this cowl. It'll be amazing.
Yeah. So I think the main thing is twofold. One, there's weeks where we don't get to play and the kids are like, we didn't get to play this week, Dad. Or I'm like, we didn't get to play this week, Dad. Oh, that's me.
Wait, dang.
But it just didn't make sense that week, right? There was just too many things. And so it's not like, oh, no. We always do a board game from 4:30 to 5:15. And if we don't, we're going to flip it. No, we do it as we're able, which is in a way also fun and exciting for the kids, because it's like, oh, today is the day we get to do it. Great. As opposed to being offended if it doesn't happen. And the other thing is we just keep an eye out for, times when it just naturally makes good sense. So, if it's one we're knee deep in and it's overly complicated and yet enjoyable to us, and, maybe Nicole has, she does photography on the side and she needs to do some, go do a photo job or do some editing or whatever. I'm like, oh, this is a classic win-win where, she can do that. And we're doing our nerd time upstairs in my office / it's 99% board game room and 1% where I actually work.
There's a computer in the corner.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is,
Yeah. Spoiler alert for coworkers. That's why my background's always blurred online meetings, is because it's just like, what is going on back there? It's like, oh, we're painting dragons. No big deal.
Don't worry about it. Giant worms. I've seen a couple of those.
Yes. Giant worms. Yep. Are eating little miniatures.
Yep.
So I think that's really helped. And then Nicole actually does enjoy playing board games with us too. Probably ones that are more traditional, like the Dixits of the world, for example.
Dixit is a lovely game, listeners. Please look that one up. How would you describe Dixit as a pop quiz?
It's like apples to apples, but with pictures instead of words.
Yeah, it's very concise. See, I knew it. I knew you'd come up with something.
Yeah, I just was prepped and ready.
But that's Nicole. Yeah, bananagrams and things like that. She likes the quick.
Yes, and so ever so often she'll be like, "Can we play a normal game?" I'm like, okay.
All right.
As long as it's not like Uno. And the kids are like, "Oh, but we love Uno." I'm like, okay, I guess we're playing Uno tonight. No offense, Uno. It's sold billions of copies. So
it's a phenomenal game. I like it. Do you guys house rule Unos at all?
Well, we actually have been gotten some of the funny ones, like I can't remember the name, but where every card is like a draw 15 or whatever.
Okay, is it like the cards actually say that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of variants. We just
it's like they took the house rules and just made different versions.
Yeah, and the rule was like if you get 25 cards, you lose. So it's like it becomes don't lose as opposed
rather than
to
trying to win.
So you're just abusing each other, and it has a funny name, where it's like not competition edition. That's not funny at all. But the gist of it is like, this is the begrudging edition, right?
Yes.
It's all like, oh, every single time you're gonna throw down and make me draw all these cards. How dare you? So
yeah.
My kids' house rules version is to start with a hand of 25, which is horrifying to me, but they really like it. And so I'm like, oh, this might be right up their alley. Except they'll start with just a few cards, but they'll literally
get to 25 fast.
Yes, yeah.
Do you play you can play a card on a card that matches? Like if I give you a draw 2, you could play a draw 2 back to me?
That's basically officially the rules.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Perfect. All right. Do you have to keep drawing until you have a playable card?
No, we haven't done that. I think that once led to too many tears.
Yeah. All right. It is one that loses you friends for sure. So Nicole will jump in. So you can keep a balance of like it makes sense in your family. You have a space dedicated to this because it's a priority.
That does really help because the thought of setting up certain games would lead me to tears and make for a joyless existence. Yeah. It's like I have to tear this down and set it back up. That's longer than the time it'll take to play. So,
I agree with that. And I guess that brings me to a conversation, just since we're on the board game topic. Obviously, I'm a huge proponent of board games. They've been my my accessible adventures after video games went away for me, is when I first. So it's been, oh my goodness, what month? April?
Yeah.
So it'll be 13 years in next month, and in May, without video games. And so I've slowly grown into this. People ask me, they're like, well, how do you manage that? Like, how do you handle board games in your life? So I guess I would ask you, what are your thoughts for someone who's never been into board games? They've played Monopoly, they played Uno. Maybe Settlers of Catan once in college with a friend, but they just got bullied the whole time and forced to trade people their sheep. Oh. So if that's been their experience so far, what would you tell them? If they say, are board games a good fit for us? How would you answer that? And then what would you tell them for like a setup for success? Like, what do you need for a commitment level? Like, do you have to change your lifestyle and be complete nerds like us, or it just won't work? Or can like normal human beings like pick up a game? If so, how might that look for a family?
Yeah. So as far as interest level, I always think of it as, a book is to a movie.
Whoa. All right. Hold on. I got, okay. Book, movie. Got it.
So here's my comparison. Book is to a movie as a board game is to a video game.
Okay.
Right? So you really enjoy movies and people are like, oh, but have you read the book? The book's amazing. Right? And so most of my life, I didn't really do any board games at all and kind of poo-pooed the normal ones. Like, sorry. Like, who cares about sorry? But I was really into video games. And then when we started getting into board games, it was like, oh, to me, it is a natural comparison, right? Because it's the imagination aspect, right? And that's something I enjoy about it with my kids is if you sit back and look at it, like if you were to watch a muted recording of yourself playing, it's probably hilarious and embarrassing because you're like, we're moving on little pieces of plastic and rolling dice and like, what in the world? But it's because you're using your imagination, right?
Yeah.
In the same way that a book, it's like, well, I didn't picture that guy looking like that. You know, this movie's ruined. This person's supposed to have brown hair and it's blonde, you know, because you got to use your imagination to envision what it would look like. And to me, it's a similar thing, right? So if that's appealing to you, the chance to use your imagination, or if you're big into books, I feel like it's a natural fit because, again, you get to be imaginative. And if you're doing it with your kids, you get to explore how it impacts them and the ways in which they get to, right?
Yeah, and if you're not comfortable with your imagination, I get that. There are games that don't require as much. Like for our family, a good gateway would be Carcassonne. It's more complex than Settlers in terms of... That's not true. It's more cooperative than Settlers. You're all flipping the little puzzle tiles of the French countryside of Carcassonne, which is a region of Carcassonne. And then you build little towns and little fields, and it's very whimsical in terms of its artwork. Is very fun to just look at, and it's easy to do, and it's collaborative. Yes, you're competing, but you like suggest where people could put pieces and like help one another out. So you would say start with the idea of like cooperative awe. You're having this wonder experience. How much space does a person need? Like, do they need a dedicated room? Like, this is something I've tried to wonder because we're to the point now, full disclosure. Anna bought a lovely hutch for our home that was intended for another purpose, and I definitely commandeered it. I was like, I'm going to go ahead and put board games in there. And now it's like middle of our house, middle of our living space between like where we would sit and where we eat.
It's quite lovely.
Is lovely filled with all of our favorite board games. And then the other ones get put in the archives in the garage. But like that's our centerpiece. And that's a big ask for people right out of the gates. What would you say is like minimum barrier for entry?
I think I don't think a dedicated room. I mean, that's just for me, I had an office, which was, like you said, a computer in the corner. So I was like, oh, well, why not fill this with a bunch of tables? If you were to go in that room and just see it, especially without the board game stuff out, it'd be like, what is he thinking in the decorating of this room? Right? It's ridiculous. Yeah. But we had that extra space. And so because that's something we value and want to put time into and enjoy doing as a family, it's like, okay, let's throw an enormous table, which should never be, probably can't even fit in this room. Let's put it in here and fill it with stuff. Dude, right?
That table is huge.
Yep. It's traveled coast to coast with us, and I'm proud to still have it. And now it's covered with like kids paint projects. Yeah. But anyway,
it's awesome.
Do you have to do that? No. But as far as it being, this niche area that we really enjoy, it just makes sense for us because it cuts down on the preparation and the setup that you can have that. But there's times, we have a little table that we've put in our living room, which is kind of like hey, we can put out something, maybe not in a permanent setting, but it doesn't drive Nicole crazy to see some of the pieces out. Yeah. After a few days, it's got to get put away. But it's kind of like, okay, you can set up, you can play a shorter game. Maybe it's not, you can't carve out the 45 minutes to knock it all at once. It can sit out a little bit longer, and then you put it away and do something else. So I feel like it doesn't have to be a dedicated room, but certainly for some of these ones that we enjoy, maybe you want to have your tempered expectations that it's like not going to be, 30 minutes, we'll knock this out. It's like, you may very well be putting out little pieces for 30 minutes.
Depending on the game. Yeah.
Yes. And not every like that. Okay. Again, that's the kind that we like, but there's some, I was telling Nathan the other day, I've really started to enjoy some of these games that streamline the setup process, right? Where instead of maybe having lots of map tiles and little pieces of cardboard for terrain and things like that, it's like you flip open a book and the book is the map. And it has all the stuff, and you just start pretty much, right? And I would have thought a couple of years ago, that's lame. Why would I ever want that? I love having all these little pieces. But as time goes on and you realize, you want to spend more of the time playing with the kids rather than having them watch you set up to play with the kids.
Find me a D16.
Exactly.
A D16 connector tile.
I think they do like that, but I don't, for me, it's almost like, I'd rather, I have this little window of time with them. Let's play, not, assemble. So anyway, and now I'm like, oh, that's genius. I'll flip open this book and
page number, you got your rules, you got everything you need.
There's nothing, dare I say gasp, there's nothing to even paint to get started. Yeah.
You gets.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's awesome.
That
All
really
right.
helps.
Okay. Because that's been a thought for me, because it's an easy go-to, just what you said. It's the video game, like the analog version of like, you can still have an amazing time and have a lot of the positives that are there in games with challenges and problem solving and cooperative play and like a lot of the cool things about video games. But as you and I were just talking before this of like, video games are super cool, but people now start to have this equation in their head of like, for the amount of money I had to pay for that, did it last long enough?
Right.
And doing this, which blew my mind when you mentioned it, because that's sad and not the point. Like, the video game isn't to maximize time away from reality. The video game is to be really a supplement for the awe of reality. Like, reality sometimes gets busy and crowded and cluttered, and that's why we have these, fictional tales that we dive into, because they almost can more clearly cut to certain realities of love and sacrifice and awe and struggle, right? Like, without the clutter of taxes and road quality, like, it doesn't, something about
two of my favorite topics.
In the insurance company, you're really tickling my fancies. But I would say board games can be great for that. I think they do a nice job of getting around some of the like, just be distracted for distractions sake. I struggled on that, and I'm clearly very biased for it. One that I will throw out, if you're into like a game that when it was made, I was like, that's just a cool idea. Photosynthesis. I don't know if we've ever actually played this together, but you literally plant seeds. The sun travels around the outside of the board, and each turn you can spend sunlight points to grow seeds into like little trees to medium to big. And that determines how far on the board they can cast their other seeds. And you're basically just trying to get more sunlight. Because if your big tree grows in front of a little tree and the sun's on that side of the board, it'll shadow the little tree and you're the one who gets all the sunlight points. And I was like, this is simple and genius. And they have little cardboard standees, very satisfying, like little oak trees and Douglas firs.
Oh,
and it's
nice.
It's delightful. I've tried to find my son some games that aren't just murdering your enemy.
Well, that makes me think of, and I know you've talked about it before, Wingspan, right?
Yeah.
The funny thing with Wingspan is we bought it. We've only played it like 2 times.
Yeah.
And yet the use of it has been enormous.
Time out of box.
Yes, time out of box. How's that for your ratio? TOO. Anyway, because I will walk by my daughter's room and she'll just be stacking all the birds into her favorites and her second favorites and her 17th favorites. And she just enjoys looking at it. Now, the other thing that I think of when I think of Wingspan is it just had a sequel come out. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called Wormspan.
Oh, is that a real? I thought it was a joke.
Nope. It's WYRM as in Old English dragons. And it's Wingspan, but with dragons.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's the follow-up game from the same company. So
okay. I thought it was like a
April Fool's.
Yeah, I thought it was like an April Fool's thing. I saw it on like the same like general blue and white background. But with I was focused on Wingspan because that's what I do know. It does a great job when we're talking about being nerds, parenting well, like loving our kids, guiding them into awe, setting them up for success, and finding awe that allows them to be present in like their awareness of the Lord. I will tell you, when I played video games, I was never aware of the Lord's presence, and I was rarely aware of the people playing next to me. I played socially a lot. That was one of my excuses. I was like, well, if other people are playing, then I'm hanging out with people. I know a lot of kids now don't get that chance because a lot of your games demand that you be alone in order to be together. But I wasn't aware of the Lord. I wasn't aware of the people around me. Like, my sole thought was get, win, play again, rinse, repeat, skip meals and sleep if I have to. And I have found that with board games, one, you fatigue out, which is great. Like, you're like, I can't read another line because I can't make sense of these rules anymore. Like, my brain is just fatiguing and I have to go for a walk. But also that like the awe and wonder that comes in the regimented portion of the game, which is good. But I would still say, like, that's organized play. I'm reading the book, The Anxious Generation. Excuse me, that's not true. I've read it. I'm giving away it in droves.
I'm reading it the 7th time.
Right, I've read it a couple times. But in that, he talks about the importance of free play. And in you talking about the research on free play, that parent-guided play is great. Being on a sports team, for example, does help mental health and helps your ability to handle stress. But free play, kid-oriented, they make up the rules and they self-regulate kind of free play. Not Lord of the Flies, but within loving boundaries. please hear me for what I'm saying, is good. And so what I love about board games is the house rules thing. So my boys borrowed actually a game from you guys. So the Dice Throne is combat Yahtzee. Then there's an adventure version where you can march through effectively a dungeon, and you fight bosses and stuff. And so they're playing that. They played that through twice, which is great. It's fun. And again, you're not going to get overstimulated playing a board game. But then they were like, wait a minute, Dad. We could take these standees from a third game, build a magnetile dungeon with like towers, and I'll have to try to post this picture. I have a picture of like this thing they took over a table with, and they spent just hours building it and thinking through it and then laying out where the bad guys were going to go. And then they had this whole like battle thing with their little heroes and and it was roughly adjacent to this Dice Throne game, but not at all the rules. And I was like, that is like, they're correcting each other. Like, oh, that one can't do that roll. Like, because it's made up and you're getting closer to like playing with the stick. Like this stick is a wand. Now it's an airplane. Yeah. like that idea of imaginative play, which is so important for kids to be able to buffer rules. And by that, I mean, one kid makes up a rule, other kid counters with like a augmentation on that rule, and they collaboratively act on the new made up rule that didn't exist before and doesn't really even make sense, but they've agreed it's part of the reality of the space they've made. And like, that's important for society. Like the psychology on that part of a child's development is so, so important. So I love it when board games can get to that point, when they're prevalent enough and they're around enough that we don't become such sticklers on the rules. I think you and I have both played with people like this, where you're like, these are supposed to be fun. And in fact, this is no longer the case when I play with this individual. Like, you are really crushing the soul of like what this is supposed to be about. And so when we don't just turn into D20 soul crushers, but instead can actually focus on the like, oh, this is supposed to be a story. It's supposed to be interactive. It's supposed to be fun. I love that. And that made me smile when I was watching them do that. Thanks for letting us borrow that game.
Absolutely.
That was amazing. So let me just ask you a couple things then, as we kind of think of this through. I am reading, have not read all the way, The Intentional Father, and I believe you've read that, correct?
Yes, I have.
What do you think it looks like as we're talking about being dads who are passionate about something? Again, we talked a lot about board games. It was really to stop me from talking about cycling the whole time, because we all know that would be the other default.
Thank goodness.
Exactly. So whether it's cars or golf or I'm trying to think of people, gardening, or I'm trying to think of people I know and what their kids are into, horse riding and sports of all varieties, or even just watching sports. You have a favorite team you follow. We are leading our kids into our interests and passions. And as a good friend of mine said, that we don't, as fathers, we're not trying to be the leaders and like earning the right, like we are the leaders by default. Like whether or not you like it, your kids are going to look to you and do what you're doing. That's good and bad news, because some of us aren't up to snuff. The Intentional Father is a book that does a great job of challenging us about intentionality. Do you like what you're modeling for your kids? When it comes to our areas of nerddom, whatever our area of passion might be, that the Lord's put on our hearts, that we're showing some of God's character through by creating and investing in and using the skills and interests he's given us. What do you think is one way we can do that? Or maybe what's one way you are actively doing it right now, not necessarily in board games, but in the greater picture of inspiring your children intentionally to see the Lord in their wonder and in their amazement?
Yeah, I think just this attitude of turning all things that we do back to God's word, back to the truth of the gospel, right? Where it's not like, falling into the trap of church is on Sunday, worship is Sunday during the singing, and the rest of the time
you're inoculated for your week.
Right. The rest of the time is you're free to do whatever as long as you make it to the next Sunday, right? Yeah. And if you miss, then you're really in trouble. You better find a priest or something, right? And so, I almost want it to be not tedious, but where the kids, when a topic comes up, whether it's watching a cooking show or playing a board game or driving in the car, like something is said or observed, and Nicole and I will be turning that back to, what does that reveal about God's character? Or how does that point out this passage of scripture we just read? Or, when I say tedium, I mean like my kids could almost be silently mouthing along what we're going to say, like behind me, without the eye roll. That's the key. And that they know that we're going to point that back to the Lord. And so, or when you see, again, I go back to like a TV show, right, where you're talking about, you observe character qualities that reflect things that maybe you value or don't, right? And that you would talk with them about, hey, isn't that interesting that in this movie, which is in no way meant to be like, oh, here's the gospel, we're going to teach about Jesus, that they're clearly feeding on this human nature and desire to look for this beauty or to appreciate how unbelievably valuable self-sacrifice is, right? Yeah. Why do you think the people who made this movie, who might even actively dislike Jesus, right? Why would they reveal something that we know to be true? And the kids have to kind of wrestle with that. I mean, they probably know initially it's the Sunday school answer.
We know it's Jesus. I don't know how we get there, but I know it. It's gray. It has a fluffy tail. Eats nuts, lives in a tree, must be Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's just the law of God written on their hearts, and that, in our doorways, in our conversations, in our play, that we're turning their thoughts back that way as well and encouraging that in them. So I think that that's incredibly valuable, right? And so, I've mentioned it in previous podcasts, mentioned again, right? I've said to my kids many times, right? There's no greater love than a man would lay down his life for another, right? That's what I'm picturing, because now every time my kids hear that referenced or they see an example of it, they all just turn and look at me with like the dad, and because I don't have to say anything, right? They know that that's something I bring up all the time, because it is something an emotion frequently played up, like in a movie or a story, or in a board game, where it's like, oh, you care about that because Jesus cares about that. And they know that, right? I try not to miss the opportunities to highlight that. Now, that one I've done so many times that now they're highlighting it for me, but that goal would be in all that we do.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yes, of trying to be deliberate. I like that idea. And in the intentional father, the whole idea is not here's how to raise your kids God's way, but here's how, not taking any shots at that book. I just realized that is actually the title of a book. But that's not his point. His point is, have you gone prayerfully before the Father, your heavenly Father, and asked what you should be doing with these kids he's given you in this really small season? I know that I just had a buddy who had a new baby, and I know that season from newborn to 6 weeks is like 10 years long. So the short season of the total number of the years the Lord will hopefully give them, our 18 or so, are very formative, high intensity, and using them well, not because we might fail and let God down, but because it's a chance to do something beautiful and to see the Lord move in it. And I love just that idea of like, man, how can our board game time, how can our book time, how can even watching a movie that doesn't talk about the Lord, but is probably going to have this image of self-sacrifice, which is very common in at least American stories of someone having all the access and giving it up for someone who didn't deserve it because they loved them romantically or loved them in character and integrity and gave up, the giving tree style for another. And that's, also it makes your children good at literature. Please note, every time someone comes out of water, it's a baptism. Just watch for it. Our kids can spot it now. They also can spot every time it gets dark and starts raining, something bad is going to happen. And then the sunrises come at the end. It's biblical, and it'll make your children a better writer, or children better writers. Thank you for this time and conversation. Do you have anything in closing thoughts or remarks? Oh, actually, I'll throw it before I close out with you. So this is an area of passion of mine, helping dads nerd well. After every single talk I've given in the last 6 months, so October, November of last year, I've had moms specifically, I've yet for a dad to come to me, coming up to me and ask if I have resources for husbands. And they're not asking resources they can deliver. They're asking resources that I will deliver to their husbands who are, in their estimation, doing a poor job with technology. My initial knee-jerk is, no, that's not my job. Right. No, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But I do have this passion for seeing dads use their nerdness well, speaking into that. What do you think it would take to make that resource, would it make sense to speak directly to dads? Or is there even a way to do that in an empowering way, or will that always come off as judgmental? Do you need to just speak to parents in general? Or is there a way to talk to like my idea was gaming dads, specifically like nerd dads who game, not the niche of like you're into sports cars, but like you're into gaming, video games and nerddom, sci-fi, fantasy. So love God with all you are and game all you want as a tandem. Do you think that that sounds plausible? Is there a way to do that in hope and love? Or will that 100% of the time be angry spouse handing to a husband who's like, you don't want to change, but I need you to. And Nathan said you have to. Like, is there a way to be hope focused and actually reach the men on that side of the conversation?
I mean, I think it's better to just be direct, right? And go to the source and speak specifically to the group that you're interested in talking to, right?
So gamer dads.
Yeah, because to me, even if you're already defensive or hesitant about it, through that lens, even if you're hearing discussion to parents, you're going to be like, you're not fooling me. I know this is directed at me.
Yeah,
right?
It's too passive aggressive.
Yeah. So to me, it's better. We talk about this even at work all the time, right? The value of direct feedback and being clear with people, or even a reference to this book called Radical Candor, right? Like when you're caring intentionally and you want to see growth, the sweet spot is that you actually give clear, direct communication and feedback to the intended audience. Okay. Because otherwise, if you're avoiding that, then are you really showing love and care for that group or that person that you're going for? I like that. So that's my reference to Radical Candor for the day. I hope my boss hears this some year, and he's going to be like, have a little tear in the corner of his eye.
We can talk about Daniel Kahneman next. We'll do Thinking Fast and Slow. We're really going to this is all about getting you promoted. That's if you made it this far on the podcast, it's solid. Yeah. Well done. Well, thank you. Thanks for that. Do you have any closing thoughts then for our listeners, for our nerd dads, for board gamers everywhere? Any one last pitch for what 3 games should people try? How about that?
3 games to try.
I'm going to change the question on you. Okay. 3 games.
So I'd say take a look at Deliverance, but be ready for it to be, This Present Darkness, Frank Peretti, right? It's kind of like, but it's a great exposure to just thinking about spiritual warfare, but also there's just tons of like scripture in it. It's just interesting. Okay. It's very well done. And the kids love the artwork. You mentioned Dice Throne. I feel like that's a great one to look at, particularly because there's so many sets. And so, yes, there are a couple sets I'm like, we're not going to get that one. But the overwhelming number of them is like, it's very quick to play and set up and a lot of fun. And, my kids thoroughly enjoy that. Do
you have a set they should get of like the starting characters? What's a good starting? You've never played Yahtzee in your life.
Oh, well, then I would say the very first pack ever sold, which was the Barbarian and I believe the Moon Elf. Okay. They go together. They're literally, they even have categories for simplicity and complexity of play. And the Barbarian is like smash. Okay. It's a 1, out of a scale of 5 or 6. So that's a good starting point. Also, he has flaming red hair, like any good barbarian should.
Perfect. So excellent.
That's a good one to do. And then a third one, I would say, since we mentioned legacy games earlier, you could look at, there's various pandemic legacy seasons, they call them. Okay. And my kids we've only done season 1.
Okay. And I've actually never played Pandemic Legacy.
And that one, they talk about it to this day. Some of the interesting things that come up, just moving little cubes around and the spreading plague. They got to name them because it's a legacy game. You get to affect the game. So unicorn snotitis, I believe, proved to be the world's most dangerous pathogen.
It's just sparkles and rainbow colors coming out of your face. Oh, I love it.
And we had the Blue Doom. And then in honor of 2019, 2020, we had COVID-19.
Yeah, I was like, that game was probably too real at that point.
And then I think I wonder if sales plummeted that year. And then like the Black Death or whatever. So I would say those are 3, kind of different styles and, all interesting.
Unicornsnotitis. I'm sorry. That just got my funny bone.
Yeah.
All right. Deliverance Dice Throne Pandemic Legacy for an intro to legacy games. I wrote that one down with a star next to it because I've got a feeling that one needs to show up in my home at some point. Well, thanks for being here, for being a part of this conversation. I hope that you had a chance to kind of reflect on what brings you awe, how you can engage your kiddos in it. There are certainly lots of areas we did not cover in interests. My brain totally went blank when I was like, what else do people do for fun? But the options are as varied and numerous as the individuals listening to this, and I hope that you are encouraged to step into those spaces. You don't just have to run from your interests, but you do need to prune them into healthful areas of your life where you make your children a priority, make modeling God's passion for his creation and seeing his kingdom come, to make that your passion in the way you serve your spouse, in the way you love your kids, in the way you lead in your community, and then that you will continue this conversation with us. Join us next week. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Nathan at gospeltech.net. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Love God Used, and technically YouTube at Love God Used Tech. The YouTube one, anyway, you can try to find it. It's been weird. We'll try to put it in the show notes. And then you can join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech.